Hello and Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the Policy Research Institute of Market Economy, the Frederick Naumann Foundation for Freedom, and the Constructors Association of Pakistan, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 4th Pakistan Prosperity Forum. We come together today to talk about a most pressing matter affecting our economy. However, before we start, I would like to introduce you all to the Policy Research Institute of Market Economy, better known as PRIME. My name is Sayyid Ali Ahsan, and I am the Deputy Executive Director at PRIME. PRIME was the brainchild of Dr. Ali Salman, who founded the organization in 2013. Over the years, working from Islamabad, we have risen gradually to become amongst the top 100 think tanks of the Asia-Pacific region. Our research fellows are nationally and internationally acclaimed experts, working diligently to produce grounded research and aiding the government and private sector through consultancy, work, and advice. We have published research on numerous topics, including taxation, tariff policy, privatization policy, economic productivity, and so on. We also have a presence on mainstream media and host our own podcasts on our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. The fiscal sustainability of the government of Pakistan is under economic stress, and it threatens to take the rest of the economy with it. Unless government expenditures are brought under control, government staff is drastically downsized, industry is privatized, and regulation is massively scaled down, our fate is sealed. Pakistan will go bankrupt. There is, of course, the other side of the equation, the revenue side. There is no growth under the present tax regime. It misses the mark, prioritizing government needs over all other stakeholders in our economy. This is not sustainable. We have an exciting afternoon lined up for you. Please have a look at the programs which have been placed on your table. First of all, I would like to invite Ms. Birgit Lam, Country Director of the Frederick Naumann Foundation. Birgit, would you please take the stage?
Thank you, Saad, for this invitation, and good morning, everybody. Thank you to PRIME for having us, for inviting us. And I would like to welcome everybody here, the honorable keynote speakers, collaboration partners, experts, to come again every year for discussing a very pertinent issue on macroeconomics, on state's framework for facilitating a business-friendly or a more business-friendly environment. And I think this is exactly what is really the need of the day. And Frederick Naumann Foundation for Freedom is very happy to be a regular cooperation partner in this discussion. Friedrich Naumann Foundation is a German think tank, and we promote a society where people have the possibility and the space to realize their project of life, and obviously a governance structure that allows people to freely engage in business activities, mainly promoting a business-friendly environment, is a natural cause for us. So we are very happy to again join hands with you to work on a very pertinent topic, which on one side looks very technical, but at the same time it's also a very passionate topic for most people. Because apart from a person's health, probably the most sensitive part of your body is actually your purse or your wallet. And people get very passionate about the costs and also about paying taxes. And nobody nowhere in the world likes paying taxes. Obviously not. But taxes are a necessary evil, because if we want to have functioning governance structures and a societal framework, we need to contribute, and we also expect the state to deliver certain services like infrastructure, public security, education, healthcare, and provide the structures. So we need to have the proper revenue as well for the state to actually deliver these services. Now, we need to discuss, obviously, is the quality of the service delivery, but there's also the revenue side, and the tax system, which is going to be the main theme of this year's Prosperity Forum, is actually a crucial driver for economic development, and it can be incentivizing or it can be discouraging. And here in Pakistan, I mean, you're all experts, you know the facts and figures. Fortunately, some macroeconomic figures like inflation rate have gone down considerably from something of around 30% last year to going back to, let's say, more or less the normal of round about 10%, which was actually at least the figure when I came here in 2019, which was like the standard thing. But even if you take that into account, and we should acknowledge the positive factors as well, there are always structural problems that need to be taken into account in the long term as well. And the tax system is one of the things that actually make or break your economic development, and that have to be properly addressed. And the structural debates have not actually changed a lot over the last 4 or 5 years at least, and probably even longer, but I can only personally cover the last 4 to 5 years. And Pakistan has a comparatively low tax base. It's at around about 10%. Experts on an international scale would say a country in a similar position of Pakistan should have at least 15%, not 10. At the same time, if you look into the economic framework, the product basket of Pakistan has remained the same for more or less 20 years. And also the complexity of the products hasn't changed. This is also something that we highlighted in some of the studies that Prime over the last years conducted with the support of Friedrich Naumann Foundation as well. So the product basket hasn't changed considerably. The complexity of the products hasn't changed considerably. And also the integration into global value chains for Pakistan is comparatively low. And if you compare it to regional neighbors like Bangladesh, for example, there you see that over the last 20 years, significant developments have taken place that unfortunately Pakistan was not able to conduct. And the tax system obviously is one issue where you really have to pay attention to. And you have a large informal sector. Informal does not equal illegal, but obviously the tax system doesn't really encourage people to come into the tax net. You're like stably sort of about 60% of economic activity is in the informal sector. And I was actually quite flabbergasted when I came to Pakistan that you have an official concept of filers and non-filers. And this is like an accepted concept. And even when it comes to indirect taxes, like sales tax or whatsoever, you have like tax discounts for filers, and you have like higher tax rates for non-filers. Coming from Germany, this was actually for me a mind-blowing distinction. Yeah, let's say also in terms of tax justice, there should be like one level playing field, and nobody should be exempt from being a filer, yeah? Whether in the end, because your income is humble or you are more, you have like a different tax bill, a personal one, that's a different matter. But the fact that you have filers and non-filers is, I think, not an advantage or a recommendable thing for the state and for the state revenue and for the concept of paying taxes in itself. And then obviously, who pays taxes? You have like a strong focus on the salaried class, which is obviously the easiest to get at. There's a strong focus rather on industrial activity. And when it comes to agriculture, services and trade, it depends a bit whether it's in the informal sector or in the formal sector. But there's a strong incentive not to come into the net and to the tax net. And obviously there are bureaucratic hurdles why this is the case. But there are some other hurdles as well. You all know the facts. I don't need to get into more details, but I think that this is a structural issue that needs to be addressed also in order to give an even burden on all the taxpayers and also create a kind of tax justice among the citizens and transparency. I think this is also crucial for people to actually accept that paying taxes is a necessary evil if we want to get proper service delivery on part of the state as well. Where we need transparency and accountability on the other side as well. That's the other side of the medal. But in terms of revenue generation, I think there is like a structural debate that has to be properly conducted and also be translated into a pragmatic and an easy to follow way for the taxpayers. And this way I welcome a lot this study done by Prime and Pied, which will be discussed today, and I feel is a very necessary contribution to this debate. And I do hope that it doesn't start here with a debate, because this is somehow the season of debates. Right now, even within Marriott, I could attend like 3 to 4 more meetings which are now going on about sustainable development, about trade, about macroeconomic development. So you really need to focus where you're going. You can end up literally having like similar debates in different backgrounds, but actually that you get the understanding that something needs to be done. And I think there are enough experts and there is enough knowledge here on the ground from the business side, from the academic side, and also from the public sphere, that you need to get this system back on its feet. It needs to stand and walk on its 2 feet. Also for Pakistan to get out of this vicious cycle of depending too much on international loans, like every year, again, when the fiscal year draws to an end, we have the IMF discussions going on, and in the end, it's because the public budget is not properly balanced. And Pakistan still struggles to actually increase its own revenue in a way that it deserves. And I mean, in the end, every household, whether it's a personal one or a government one, knows that in the long run, you cannot spend more than what you earn. And if you keep coming back to, let's say, your relatives and continue borrowing money, obviously this has consequences. It has consequences on your political leverage, and obviously it has consequences for the economic side and for doing business here in Pakistan, but also on the international level. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, importers or exporters to or from Pakistan were not able to actually order goods against invoices. It was cash against delivery. And everybody who's a business person knows that if in a business environment your company cannot order goods against invoice, but it's always cash in advance, then actually your business credibility is completely gone, and you're nearly bankrupt, yeah, if you can't do that anymore. So actually, for Pakistan as a state, with its credibility in the international business sphere, but also for your own functionality within the country, you need to have a working and a credible tax system that is also accepted by the business community and by the citizens as a necessary evil, obviously, but seen as something where you need to contribute and which is also able to deliver. And I'm really grateful to this initiative that Prime has taken to actually contribute with an innovative paper on this debate. And I wish you all the best to hopefully make an impact and promote honest taxpayers with an efficient tax system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Birgit. The Frederick Naumann Foundation has been instrumental in raising awareness on the needs of industry and markets. However, sadly, it is their last year in Pakistan. As they wrap up their operations in the country, we are hopeful that the flag of economic prosperity will continue to live on as their legacy. To help us achieve this, for the first time, the Pakistan Prosperity Forum has a private sector partner, the Constructors Association of Pakistan, supporting the activities. We thank them and invite Engineer Arshad Dad Sahab, who's the Chief Advisor at CAP, on the stage to say a few words. Thank you, Arshad Sahab. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. We decided to partner with the Prime think tank because I think, as was just mentioned, that taxation and taxation policy, although it's a necessary evil, but it has to be very well managed to bring about the positive results for the country and for individual sectors. I am here only to bring something on the table which is from a taxpayer's viewpoint, or the bottlenecks that we face or the harassment that we face even when we want to pay taxes. So it will be a short, brief presentation just to introduce the association and what we do and what are the major issues that we are facing now, so that this forum and this think tank can take this input and debate and deliberate upon it and then build it into the tax reform policy that they are so good at doing, and they are experts and we are not, but here is a feedback from the field. Okay, quick introduction to our association. We were established in 1997. We are the registered trade organization with the DGTO and represent the construction companies of Pakistan. And we are managed from the regulatory point of view. We come under the Pakistan Engineering Council, whose chairman is sitting here, and I thank you for attending this very important seminar, Engineer Wasim Nazir. And we also are nominated on the governing body of the Pakistan Engineering Council, and we have 2 members in the Pakistan Chamber of Commerce, Federation of Pakistan Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And our office bearers are located in all the provinces of Pakistan. Now, the construction industry, it's very important to understand what constitutes the construction industry. It is the 3 C's: the client, whom we work for; the consultant, who design the projects and make the specifications and sometimes supervise the project; and the construction contractors. Now, the construction contractors are technically called the constructors according to the PEC Act that governs us. The specific word is the constructors, the one who builds the project. So these 3 entities make up the construction industry, and it's a service industry. We provide our technical input and our experience to deliver our services for the construction or making an asset for the government of Pakistan, for the PSDP projects, for the annual development ADB projects in the provinces, and for the industrial sector and the development sector in the private sector, for the normal industrialist or the land developers that they. Now, we must understand there is a striking difference between a constructor and a developer. The construction, we bring services, and the developer sells a product. You know, he sells office space, he sells a plot, maybe he develops it a plot, he sells commercial space, but we bring the value addition into that project. So we are the people who add value. If a raw piece of land is developed into a housing society, and we go and build roads and infrastructure, now that value addition comes from the construction part of the whole project. And so that is the difference. And so selling products by the developers and providing service by the constructor. The associated industries that go with us, if it's a road project, is more than 12 associated vendors and suppliers are associated with this. And if it's a building works, it's about 40 plus industries that go with it. So therefore, the importance of this sector can be understood that it's the largest employment generator after agriculture. So that is the importance of this sector, because if you want to reduce poverty, the agriculture sector is about 70% agrarian, and we are about 38% of the employment that we generate. And the next most important thing about the employment is that it's wide spectrum. It's a wide spectrum antibiotic. It's like, we employ unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled labor, we employ engineers, we employ site supervisors, drivers, chowkidars, security people on the site, and engineers, associate engineers, graduate engineers, master's engineers. So the spectrum of the employment generated is quite wide. And then a very important aspect about the employment generation is that this industry provides the training for the skilled and semi-skilled people and the engineers who go abroad for employment and then are linked to the remittance that come in, which is now the highest foreign exchange earning, even more than what we export. So this industry plays a vital part in training those people who go abroad and then are part of the chain that send remittances back to the country. It is said that when construction moves, the country moves. But at the moment, construction is at a standstill. And the regional share of the share in the GDP, in this context, it is India. We are the lowest among the regional countries as a percentage, and it is now even less than 2%. The latest, I will just show you the latest report from the State Bank. It's on a negative side. And we must understand that the construction firm registration has fallen over the years with PEC. Now, all constructors in Pakistan are licensed by the Pakistan Engineering Council. We cannot work and a project cannot be executed till it's a licensed construction company, which is done by the Pakistan Engineering Council. Now, look at this, the limits, the working limits of the contractors are displayed. The bottom three, the SMEs, they're not even the SMEs, I'll call them the small enterprises, constitute 88% of the construction contractors in Pakistan. Now, policies have to be designed to cater to these, because we all know that the SMEs form the backbone of any sector and are the real generation of employment and growth of a country. These lower categories, the other may manage themselves because of the, the orbit in which they have come, in spite of all the roadblocks. But these bottom three categories, which 25 million, the limit 65, 200, 500, this is with the expensive construction materials today, this is a very low ceiling anyway. But these are the people who need to be thought about and who need to be considered when making policies. And the enrollment and the licensing of the construction contractors by PEC has fallen over the last 5 years from approximately 50,000 to now about 25,000. So this is the loss of construction companies in Pakistan. This is the recent sector, this is by the source is the State Bank of Pakistan. This is in dollar terms and rupee terms. This is the output has fallen and we are now down to 3 billion, so it's less than 2% of the GDP. Now we come to the topic of the day, which is the tax regime. Now, this has been said many times, and I'm sure I'm going to listen to more when the experts come here, that generally, for durable, equitable, and sustainable growth, a fair, simple, and consistent tax regime featuring the ease of compliance and the low cost of compliance is the paramount importance. I think these are the basic principles that we must understand. And it should also be clearly understood and accepted. At times it's understood, but it's not accepted. That tax increase inhibits growth. We cannot have keeping taxing the same 3 million, or I don't know how many taxpayers, and keep taxing them and then expect growth. Now, policies to be formulated with stakeholders on board and considering the ground realities that we have in Pakistan. We are a poorly educated country, so the thing is that the tax regime has to be simple, compliance has to be easy, and it has to be low cost. So I request all the tax experts sitting here that these basic principles be adhered to when formulating and recommending these policies. Coming to the construction sector, particularly, the present situation is on the income tax. We were taken out of the fixed tax regime, which was at 7-8% of our turnover, to the minimum tax regime. Now, this minimum tax regime means that if I have a tax deduction withholding income tax at 7.5 to 8% from all my payments, and the corporate rate is 29%, I must be making around 30% profit on my works to come to a 29% of, 8% of 29% corporate rate. This is simply not possible because the engineering estimates that the government makes, in those estimates, the contractor's profit is limited to 10%. So, and this minimum tax is also not adjustable. That's the minimum tax. That goes. And another aspect is that, most of the projects that we are executing, because the industrial sector and the private sector is down, and most of the projects that we rescue comes from the government projects, which is the PSDP and the ADPs. Now that's like taking money from one pocket and putting it into the other pocket. So that is coming from the PSDP budget, and a certain amount is taken out and given back to the FBR. So if you can call that really tax collection, I wonder. They have done something different for the developers. They have the 7F for the developers, where the turnover, they say the taxable income for a developer is 10% if he builds a house and sells it. 10% of the turnover is taxable profit. And then they tax that on this. If he sells plots, it's 15%. And if he does both, it's 12%. So 12% of turnover has been fixed as taxable profit. That's another way of, going around and having a fixed tax regime. But that's what they do for the similar activity done by the developer. Our proposal is that a maximum of 2% may be withheld as advance tax, the balance to be adjusted with the tax return. Now this 2% is from all our payments that are made during the course of the project, that we get monthly or bi-monthly payments. This would ensure an equitable and a fair tax regime for the construction industry. We also act as withholding agents for the FBR, for the government of Pakistan. Now, instead of facilitating a withholding agent, they penalize us if we make a mistake. And the dynamics of this industry are such that we deal with some very small scale suppliers and subcontractors, because construction is by nature migratory. We are here in one place, we are doing a project in another place, even urban, rural, or even in very remote areas. Now when we go into remote areas or peri-urban areas, there is no banking facility there. The people we deal with have no bank accounts. Our labor payments, which are in cash, are not accepted by the FBR. The limit is that if you have a payment of 15,000 or more, you have to make it through a check. If you have an expense of 10,000 or more rupees, you have to make it through a check. That's not, we can't comply with that. It's way beyond what the field situation is. So, and when we do not come up to the compliance requirements with the FBR, they add back the cash transactions as not our expense, increase our profits on the paper, and then tax us, and then that is where the party begins. And then we dance to their tunes. Then we dance to their tunes, their music and our dance. So we propose that either we should not be treated as withholding agents, or 30% of turnover should be accepted as allowed as cash transactions. Because it's just impossible to work everything on a check or a bank basis, because we deal with labor, we deal with small suppliers, sand, earthworks, tractor trolley, and they don't have bank accounts, and opening a bank account is no longer easy. Sales tax on services. This is another area with the provincial sales tax. We have to file, every province has its own, so we would like this to be rationalized and made into a single sales tax for all provinces. And another interesting thing is, the law says that the sales tax has to be paid by the service receiver. What they have done is that they say now, the FBR says, if the service receiver is not giving you tax, they hardly pay our own invoices, then you pay them, and then you may not have any magisterial powers to take the money out of a service receiver. So that's another thing which has to be sort of looked into. Now we have been saying this for over a year, we have been discussing this, we have been proposing this, from discussions to proposals to pleadings to laments. It has now become a rant. I hope people listen we read about intelligence-based operation against the militants. I'm hoping that we see wisdom-based tax policies. Thank you.
Now let's get to our experts. We are honored to have with us Mr. Alexishvili from Georgia. Serving as the finance minister of Georgia between 2005 till 2007, he is credited with bringing about substantial reform in public finance and for raising the Georgian ease of business ranking from 136 to 18 over a very brief period of time. He is presently the chairman of the Policy Management and Consulting Group, with about 20 years of experience now advising governments around the region in the area of tax and customs policy reform and in doing business environment. Alexi, if you could take a seat on the stage, and Dr. Ali Salman, Executive Director of Policy Research Institute of Market Economy. Sir, if you could also join. So, Alexi, if you could please take your presentation.
Good morning. It is my great pleasure being with you today. This is my first time being in Pakistan, so the main main idea will be just to share the experience of specifically Georgia, but you know, if you during the conversation there will be some questions about general ideas about the philosophy of reform or philosophy of tax policy and administration, and that would be like a broader discussion that would be, of course, very important and pleasure to me. So, as far as I understand, there is the break at 11, so my presentation will be just, you know, I'll try to make it as short as possible. I will just, you know, go slide by slide as fast as possible, and then if you have some specific questions, we will just, you know, go deeper into this one or another particular issue. So, a little bit giving you just a small introduction about myself. I used to be Minister of Finance for 3 years. Before that, I was Minister of Economy around a year in Georgia. Like, you know, I've never been a political party guy, but more a technocrat working on policy making, policy elaboration. And my background comes from all economic policy all the time. Like, you know, I used to work there. I studied in this subject. I graduated from Duke University, specifically public finance management. So, and that was like some kind of, you know, room of opportunity when some new young generation came into power, and just, you know, we had some brilliant chance to pursue these reforms that I will be talking about. So before we start, I will just, you know, go a little bit about like background about the country and then the profile of the country. Okay, so that's some numbers about Georgia. Georgia is a small country. This is a part of former Soviet Union. Country itself is like around 4 million population, and these are just general numbers. Like, you know, nominal GDP per capita right now is around 8,000. Real GDP growth last year was 7.5. Unemployment rate is quite high still. Inflation is manageable and targeted, and there are some the information about this ongoing import-export partners, and the main partners we still keep this with the CIS, like former Soviet Union countries, and then European Union is one of the partner, and China, as you can like find out in as other countries are doing as well. So going to the next slide, I will just, you know, show why Georgia was being considered as a successful one for these economic reforms. And that's really very important, because when there is the demand to listen to the story of Georgia, the question is why? What has happened there? And this particular chart also shows what was the main reason for it. Let me just a little bit briefly describe it. So, after collapse of Soviet Union, during Soviet Union, Georgia being considered like not too rich, not too poor, somewhere in the middle, with some industrial capacity, mainly agriculture is being considered. And then after collapse of Soviet Union, we entered into the serious, like, tragic events right away, like, the civil unrest and many difficulties related to politics. And then you see that huge drop of the economy. Like, this is like a whole tragedy. Like, after the Second World War, Germany was much better than Georgia after the collapse of Soviet Union in terms of the economy. And you see this as the reduction of the 44% reduction of the economy in one particular year. In total, that was around 80% during 3 consecutive years. So you see this, and then after, there was some kind of, more or less stability in 95, and that shows some positive signal, but, still this GDP growth and GDP is just, on the same side, and this is not changing too much. And then after 2003, where these main reforms had started, till 2008, that was like in a period when we just, did some kind of fundamental reforms in many different areas. That was not one particular one. I will talk about that in taxation as well, but that was more like a complex. And then you see so high growth rate right away. You see also, GDP per capita, GDP nominal terms also, rising right away. And then there are some, backdrops on 2000, 2009 and 2020, and that was caused by, the one with the military conflict with Russia in 2008, and another one was caused by pandemic. But, overall, economy was doing well. And then I will also go into this one, and in 3 consecutive years, in 2004 to 2008, the growth rate was more than 9%. And even now, the growth rate is really very high. So next slide shows, let me go to slide by slide. That also shows, the same trend, but, that's GDP per capita. And this yellow line is Georgia. And then you see that, Georgia standing in 1992, together with other countries, somewhere on a quite low level. And then you see in 2024, so, high-speed growth rate. And that's why, considering Georgia as the successful one in this regard, also together with other reforms, specifically in doing business area, Georgia being considered #1 reforming country by World Bank in 2005-2010. So, this particular period was also very important. If you see also this is FDI, foreign direct investments, and we all understand that, without foreign direct investments, developing of the country, the economy, especially small economy as Georgia was and is now still it is absolutely difficult. And then those reforms that allowed us to not only double and triple FDIs, but you see the difference between 2004 and 2006 and 2007. This is almost increased by 10 times, and that was really very important element for growth contribution. Again, looking at a little bit about background, because still, to refresh ourselves where we are coming from, you see, real GDP change, percentage change in years, minus 20%, then minus 45%, minus 25%, still minus 11%, and then that was huge disaster, for the economy. And inflation, you see also, because after collapse of Soviet Union, Georgia introduced some kind of quasi-currency that was called coupon, and then this coupon was just, as a mean of the change in the currency. But the inflation rate for that one, because the government that time just supplied too much without any economic policy understanding and rational, you see that the inflation was 1,000%, and sometimes that reached some kind of crazy numbers as well. So, and therefore, Since 1995, and when the new currency was introduced, and then the stability has been achieved, and then, more or less, country became kind of, the institutions started working, and some new elements being introduced. That was more or less a good signal, but still was not enough to reach economic growth. So economic growth still was a problem with all other elements, together with all other elements. And the most important one was tax to GDP ratio, because we could not collect taxes. And the most important problem was that in 2002, 2003, the problem was the more institutional, more fundamental than we could expect. So the first problem was that there was corruption everywhere. Every field, every area, every sector, every layer was totally corrupted. And that was, the serious problem for the society. And even, I myself used to work in one of the commission, anti-corruption commission, and, we were thinking that, maybe this is the culture. Maybe we cannot just, overcome this. Maybe we should just, accustom to this. Now, this is the life. That's how we should live with that. So, and that was really very devastated. And 2002, 2003, it was also the very important time when. The leadership, elite, people who had some kind of ideas how to change, they had some kind of interaction with each other to make some moves. And the second one was lack of government transparency and credibility. Of course, that is the first signal when there is no trust with the government. Whatever they say, everyone says, okay, come on, this is some kind of game. And then, and then. Absence of unified and coordinated development policy, because one ministry was doing one, another one doing absolutely contradicting to this one, etc. So that was the situation when the government was not acting on a normal way. Budget deficit, of course, that was very important, accumulating debt. Overall, debt was not very high, but the point was that, since we had really very low level of tax to GDP ratio, we could not kind of, pay for debt services. And therefore, country was almost bankrupted, somewhere at the edge of the bankruptcy. Tax revenue, tax to GDP ratio was around 13%, but there was also huge number of areas, huge portion of areas in the budget that was around 70%. We could not spend for pensions and salaries, and the areas were accumulated every month and every year. So at the end, there was in 2003, new political group came into power, more young generation, having some enthusiasm doing something, having some enthusiasm, not being swamped into corruption, change the country, let's just, do something which will be absolutely different than was before. But how we should start? What is the first step? I mean, where it comes from? What is the first target, and we should go. And then, of course, all these reforms are not just one side. It is not one particular area that you can tackle or you could just address, and everything just becomes bright. It is not like this, right? So, and we see that these are just at least 6 in terms of economic reforms, 6 particular areas which we addressed. And we addressed not one by one, but we addressed all together. But of course, with some consistency within each of these, in tax administration and policy, because this is definitely very crucial and important, and free trade, and that was also very important, and I will talk about that more. Budget policy, because of course, you understand that licensing and permits, this is doing business reform for sure, because without that it is not possible, and privatization and state-owned enterprises, and get rid of these kind of bad assets as much as possible, or inefficient, let me say, in a different way. So, and then monetary policy, and I will touch some general ones. That is the main topic for today's discussion. But if you have some other questions about some other areas, let me also go deeper to this. So we started about taxation. Like tax policy and administration is the most important part, because if government doesn't have money, they cannot just do anything. They cannot spend for education, that was already clearly mentioned. Not education, not for healthcare, not for any infrastructure, and therefore, this is absolutely inefficient. Not having the resources for that, and then. Okay, we should move towards more active tax policy and administration. But what does it mean? What the good system itself means for particular country, for particular situation? And we had this that clarity right away, saying that has to be easy and simple. That's really very important, because that has to be easy and simple for everyone, for taxpayer, for tax administrator, because sometimes we have a feeling that, whatever we decide in the government, tax officer somewhere in the region, he has exactly the same idea or exactly the same knowledge. Not at all. I mean, they are just acting absolutely differently. They have their own knowledges coming not from legislation, but coming from some training that comes from their senior officers. And then in this kind of mismatch or gap within this knowledge, it creates a lot of difficulties for taxpayers at the end, right? So at the end, that goes towards the corruption, because if something is absolutely blurry, then absolutely clear interaction will take place. And this clarity on the other side is a so-called shadow economy. And our main point was to make it easy and as simple as possible. We should also reduce rates, like low tax rates, and I will talk about that further. Universality, which means no exemptions. We needed that everyone is under the same rules, and that's really very important. Corruption-free, and corruption-free is also a very important issue, because that means no tolerance to corruption. I mean, because I understand that societies like us, in Georgia, we had that one. Okay, I mean, if something happens there, that's okay if it is not too much. And no one knows what is this too much. And this is very important to keep this no tolerance to corruption, because otherwise this always damages the overall environment. Then internationally competitive tax environment, because we need to just compare ourselves to our neighboring countries, so that the business environment in this particular country has to be much better than other countries if we really want to attract investments. And then, of course, trustworthy cooperation with businesses. Because, we need to keep businesses on loop, we need to let them know what is expected and what is, they have to predict their own businesses as much as possible. So this is factors for successful tax system, what helped us at the end to move towards that. First is the political framework, high political support, because if this is not supported by other political players, it is not doable. That was in Georgia. I don't know how in other countries, but I've never seen anything otherwise. For example, if law enforcement institutions are not supporting this policy, that's not doable, because they are very important players in this case, not tax administration, but other more stronger guys who are existing in the country. So, and then that was exactly the case in Georgia. Then another one was policy framework, like taxes, rates, exemptions, priorities, legal framework, which is a clarity in the legislation, institutional framework, organizational structure, I will talk about that, human resources, and then hard infrastructure, of course, without that it is difficult, especially at the customs, and then soft infrastructure, which is also very important for risk management. So, at the end, what we just achieved is that we adopted new tax code. This is a legislation, we call it tax code. New customs code, the legislation on customs, new budget system law that was also related to fiscal part, and we tried to make it as, again, universal, easy to understand, and simple to implement, and improve collection and administration, business registration with all e-filings and all kind of elements for digital part of it. And then we also introduced dispute resolution mechanisms as efficient as possible, because legal judiciary is not professional in tax issues, and that's why we decided that better to just have something more efficient mechanisms rather than just put the burden on judiciary. Tax ombudsman that we introduced, that worked for a while, more or less well. Self-compliance, because self-compliance is exactly what creates the proper tax system, and these are just taxes that we just decided to keep. This is like personal income tax, that's corporate income tax, VAT, excise tax, customs duty, and property tax, and all other taxes were just abolished. So let me just show that. So these are like, these are all these taxes that was before, that was large list, it was also there. We just abolished all of them because we thought that this is absolutely meaningless. Like, there were some tiny, like, tax on usage of symbolic kind of stuff, or there was some kind of tourism tax, etc., etc. So we decided that's not absolutely relevant, better to just, abolish that. And then keep these major ones, but also the most important one was this personal income tax and social tax, because we had these two taxes. But by nature, they were absolutely the same, because that was tax on personal income coming from the employment or coming from the employment or coming from another, like mainly social tax was the tax on employment. And what we did, since that was like a complicated one, because people always had some kind of confusion, one, and then also there was also, the personal income tax was a progressive tax system. So progressive tax system is always kind of, justified as a fair, because like, poor pays less and the rich poor pays more. But in reality, that's not true, because in reality, everyone at the end were paying the same. Because this particular progressiveness is not efficient at the end, but that created a lot of confusion, that created a lot of corruption elements, and therefore what we decided to make it as simple as possible. So at the end, in 2008, we just merged these two taxes and put a flat rate, and this is 25%, was 25 in 2008, and as we were just, also, like, you understand that this process is not just one party game. This is a multi-party game. There is an IMF, they are checking all the time, okay, you are reducing rates, whether you are collecting taxes on a proper way. So, and then, as we were showing them that, okay, we are increasing tax to GDP ratio, allowing us to reduce taxes further. So that's why we just, decided, okay, if we reach some certain target by 25% of personal income tax, is it possible to reduce this to 20, but we will just, collect more? They say, okay, let's try. And then we tried, and that worked. And then since that worked, we continued towards that. So that was the process of around like 3-4 years, but that reached the target at the end. So we can go back. If you have some questions, I will just, continue with that. And then in 2007, we started talking about that. Okay. That's what is the rational ratio of tax to GDP? Like, how do we see it? Like, what should be like a tax, like government size in the economy overall? Because that's really very important fundamental question. How much government has to take out of the economy and spend for their purposes, whatever purposes they are, good or bad, it doesn't matter. What is then this portion in the economy? And then we decided that, okay, that has not to be too much, too high. That has to be somewhere at 30%. And that's why we introduced a constitutional law. This is like a part of the constitution, saying that only 30% of GDP can be spent for government. And then, of course, like, the debt has to be under control and deficit has to be under control. This is just, typical fiscal rules that other countries also have. But that also shows the dynamics in this period, right? So red line is spending, overall spending. Green line is tax to GDP ratio. And then this blue line is capital expenditure to GDP. So you see that in 2002, capital expenditure was almost zero, because, I mean, we didn't have the money and normal purpose. And then in 2008 or 7, that already became around 10% to GDP. And that was already some kind of starting point for the economy to moving forward in terms of investing in infrastructure. That's the structure of tax. Like, of course, the biggest part comes from value-added tax, and that's absolutely normal for the economy of Georgia, like, and I will explain a little bit about value-added versus import duties, because what we did also on the other side, in terms of import duties, we just, reduced it dramatically as well. So personal income tax is around 31%, then comes corporate income tax, then excise, and other small two taxes like customs tax and property tax. Okay? So personal income tax, as I mentioned, that was like, the green line is portion to GDP, and red line is tax revenue in percentage. In total taxes. So, and you see this like dramatic increase in starting from 2005 around, like, we introduced that and then increased dramatically. So this is corporate income tax, very interesting one, because what that's also showed that, initially that being increased because like of tax administration, tax collection, we increased really very much. And then in 2007, there was a new decision made, which is really good decision. I supported that decision as well, although I was not in the government, but I was in the consultancy. That time, in 2017, there was a decision. We call it Estonian model. It is not typical Estonian, but we call it like this. But the idea was that this undistributed income of the corporation is not taxed. So only distributed income is taxed by corporate income tax and the dividend tax. So just to understand the point of it is that, companies, if they are reinvesting in their businesses, they are not taxed. And that's a really very huge incentive for companies and corporations to reinvest in their own expansion and business development, right? So that's why that was reduced in 2007 and 2008. But, that also went back. And, of course, considering like pandemics and considering issues related to the economy. But, also 2002, 2003, you see in the nominal terms that's like, doubled or even more, like tripled, which is really very good signal for the economy. Okay, so this is value-added tax. That's more or less clear, like, stable. Like what happened is that we have, so we have equal VAT on imported and local goods. That's on every goods and every services. High increase in revenues from 2004, 20% was till 2005, and since then 18%. And VAT exemptions were just, dramatically also abolished as much as possible on a normal way. Next slide. Excise tax. That's also like, we have only 4 products are taxed by excise. Tobacco, alcohol, oil products, and natural gas and vehicles. So no other products are taxed by excise. Like we wanted them to be focused, tax administration to be focused only on those 4 ones, and that's also increased from 1% to GDP to 3% to GDP. International trade. So that's really very important also part, and let me talk about this a little bit. So from 2004, we started thinking about that, like how we can develop the economy itself. Like, okay, FDI is one of the main elements. So how we should attract FDI. And FDI means not just money. The FDI means knowledge. And then bringing the knowledge, but how we can just, interact with the rest of the world, like, with our main partners. With the limited capacity of industries, we have some kind of stuff, but, still, we wanted to like investing in Georgia, it's not interesting per se, because like global economy is expanding further. It's becoming much diverse. And if someone is investing in Georgia, this investment need to be worked outside of Georgia. I mean, market should be much bigger than Georgia itself. And that's why we decided, okay, we need to go to further expansion of our market. And that means free trade agreements with our main partners, first of all. And the free trade agreements we just, started with Turkey, and then, of course, with the CIS countries, because they were our main partners. We went, we targeted, of course, the European Union, and that's our main direction, like, further integration into EU. And then we achieved free trade with China. And, doing this process, that also helped really very much, being like, more active in free trade internally as well. So what we did is that we abolished complicated tax system at the customs, like, customs duties. There were like 30 different rates, which were just, also vary from 0 to 27 or something. And then we decided, okay, we need to just, get rid of it. And we need to put on many of these goods zero tax. And then, of course, there were some kind of lobbying from different groups, like, from agriculture and from construction materials, etc. And we still kept some of them on some of these goods, but still average weighted import duty is around 1.5%, which is really very low level. So then the question is, okay, if this import duty is too low, how you are collecting taxes at the customs? The most important one is the VAT. So the most important one that we decided intentionally to reduce customs duties so that allowing businesses to put proper invoices at the customs, because what they are doing is that they are refunding their VAT at the end. So this VAT refund mechanism allows us to be like less corrupted at the customs, because customs was always like one of the most corrupted institutions in Georgia. We changed that dramatically, pretty much, because of those particular policy measures and some administrative measures, and I can talk about that, of course, if you have some questions. But what we have achieved at the end, we increased really very much VAT, but we know we just left aside this customs duty as a main source of revenue. That is not source of revenue. That's a source of protection, but from that viewpoint, we decided not to be protective, because we need more competitive product produced in the country, rather than just protecting something from those one. And that's the very important decision that has actually helped us to move towards that. Then, another issue is the complicated fiscal institutions. As I mentioned, like, there were many kind of difficulties between many different institutions, especially at the border. At the border, there were like border control. It was like Ministry of Finance, because they had to control like customs part, Customs Department, separate one, Ministry of Internal Affairs, Road and Transport Department, Financial Police, Statistics Department. So many people were standing at the border controlling many different things. In many cases not controlling, but, doing their own job. And that's why we decided, okay, it is better to just, get rid of this one, just put only one particular institution for customs control and one particular institution for passport control. And that's why that's only like, that helped us at the end to be more efficient in terms of management of border and other areas. That's a little bit about the structural changes. I will not go deeper. It kind of seems a little bit complicated, but the point here is that we had two ministries in 2004, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Tax Revenue. And then in 2004, we made decision to put those departments within the Ministry of Finance, just separately, not being under one umbrella. And in 2007, we decided to set up, to create a new agency, which is like a state revenue service. But I would like to pay your attention to this one. That was not just putting those agencies under one umbrella, because that was not helpful. What we did is that we merged these institutions into one, which means like, we decided to have like a service department within the revenue service, administration, which just, collects taxes, the audit and inspection, which is a separate unit, and then investigation, which was also a separate unit. So the idea was that not just put tax department and customs department under one umbrella, but merge this into two parts, saying that, okay, there is a tax revenue service hall, only providing services. They are not controlling anything. And then there is a control department working for risks and risk mitigation. And there is audit. They are going and auditing whatever there is, like whether this is for customs or whether this is for taxes. Okay? So that particular picture shows this one. Like, you know, the previous one was the local offices with this one, and then we decided to merge this service, administration, and audit further. So I have 5 more minutes, I guess, but I will try to be as quick as possible. So together with the taxes, it's not, I mean, only dealing with taxes, it's not enough. And it's based on my experience, doing some businesses, doing this policy reform in Georgia, and also helping now with many different countries in this particular reform. In other countries, I also see that dealing with taxes, it is not the solution. It is one of them, but it's not enough. And that's why we decided, okay, we need to also work on doing business reform. And doing business reform is like working on licenses, business registration first of all, and then licenses and permits and all this many different stuff, which is in many cases a huge burden for the businesses. And in many cases, in many cases in Georgia, that was also the experience that business was not started and that was already taxed, right? So like it's not just this is just an idea and that's already taxed while paying these licenses and permits and registration fees, etc. So we decided to also, like, you know, squeeze or bulldozing this as much as possible. So the idea was that then there was a huge also debates and discussions in Georgia, like guillotine methodology we should take or another methodology, and then we decided to move on with the methodology, we call it 0+, which means like we adopted a new law in which we describe the licenses that is just supposed to be enforced. And we said by this law that all other licenses and permits, whatever was created during the history, it doesn't matter what, are abolished. So that particular approach is really very important, because when we started, for example, making the inventory of those licenses and permits, we just lost. Because when we prepared something, like, you know, list of those licenses, 100 or something, 200, then we found out that there are 300 more. And then when we made this inventory further, the new licenses was adopted by different bureaucratic institutions. And another issue also related to this is bureaucracy, which is also a very important element, but I will talk about that a little bit later. Another one is this service hall, which was a very important solution at that time, although I think that if right now I'm managing and dealing with my own consulting company, and when we are talking about like reforms in Georgia, I also invite some people visiting Tbilisi, because in many cases that's like, you know, usually like it seems like I'm talking about some kind of fairy tale, but you know, when they are visiting and they see how that is in operations, they realize what we are talking about. Like, you know, then this particular one, public service hall, is also a very important element to see how this intergovernmental cooperation is realized in a practical way. So that it's like, you know, which covers many different areas, like public registry for property registration. This is civil registry for the citizens. That's also many other different public services that are provided in one place and on a really very efficient way. For example, registration of vehicle takes 15 minutes, like right away. Like you go there, you have the documents, that's it. So 15 minutes. The registration of business takes maximum 1 hour, even maximum, because if you want to do that faster, you can do that even faster if you pay for like some higher fee. Getting passport, getting any document that you need. So this particular one is one of the also very important achievement, because people, when they were witnessing these reforms, initially we were skeptical, because they thought that, come on, we don't trust government. We know that it is some kind of, some trap. At the end, they just, started benefiting these kind of easy services, and that became more and more important for them. Like, the society became the partner in this process, if we just, after this particular one. So, doing business reform. So, this is the World Bank data. So, World Bank data, what that shows that, Georgia was standing somewhere above 100s in 2004 or 2006. In 2020, then that World Bank decided to just, reshape it, change it. But in 2020, we were standing somewhere at 7. So, and in some areas, like, dealing with construction permits, starting a business, paying, in some areas we were just standing somewhere in the first place or the second place. So that also shows that some reforms are easy to pursue and some reforms are a little bit difficult. For example, that also shows that reforms in starting a business, dealing with construction permits, dealing with some licenses, it's easy. It's just decision. And then that's kind of, you see that, in 2007, decision was made. In 2008, we were already somewhere, in good position, good standing. So, corruption. That's how I started. I started that, Georgia was being considered as one of the most corrupted countries in the region. And you see, this is data of the World Bank as well. Corruption Perception Index, the World Bank and Transparency International, they are doing together. And then you see the 2002, yellow line is Georgia. 2002, we are standing like, the poorest and the most corrupted country. And in 2021, right away in 2007, Georgia was already champion, like least corrupted country, comparing to the regional kind of players. Like, you see Albania, like Balkans, Caucasus, Central Asia, and these are countries that we are like, in that particular case comparing, but this also very important to see that even after the changes in the power, like, new political party came into power, but they did not change fundamental stuff which was created in 2004, 2008, which is very important to talk about. A little bit about obstacles and barriers during this process. First one is a bureaucracy, of course. Yeah, first is bureaucracy, of course. Because when you start something, talking about something, then of course that is like skepticism comes from the bureaucracy. No, that will not happen, that will not work, that will damage the situation, we will collect less, because now we are collecting now 13%, we will collect 10%, that is just, damaging with everything. So the second is institutional capacity, because there is also lack of capacity. Political instability, of course, mistrust from the public and potential partners, and especially from business community, because business community does not, they are just, the most careful about those reforms, and there is a huge communication is needed. Regional conflicts, we had those one, especially in Georgia, and external pressure. So what we have learned so far is that these accomplishments are doable, first, if there is the consistency, if there is a vision, and there is the clarity in this process. And those taxes are paid, and competitive tax environment is created, reducing corruption in all levels was achieved, and promoting a sustainable business climate also was there. But what was still remaining? And in Georgia, that particular one is still, it doesn't mean that, we created a paradise, of course. Like, this is still way ahead. And first of all, judiciary and rule of law, and we had a lot of kind of issues related to that. How we can increase judiciary independence on one hand, and then, of course, the capacity of judiciary and rule of law. Then structural unemployment gaps in human capital, because what we have inherited, those industries are absolutely outdated. Now global economy is driving up absolutely differently. So we need to catch up all the time, and therefore we need to spend and invest in human capital, and also like to pay attention to structural unemployment. And economic diversification, and reforming SOEs. We just, get rid of many SOEs, privatize them, and what we did is that by this privatization proceeds, we just reduced the government debt. So that, that was really very good move towards that, because we just reduced government debt really very, very efficiently. But still, there are some large SOEs still remain, and that needs further restructurization and maybe also privatization. Yeah, that's it. The general description of my presentation, and more than happy to answer your questions if you have some. We can just, go deeper to discuss particular elements, or we can talk about overall, political economy side, or we can talk about, politics, if there are some. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for a very comprehensive, well-informed, well-structured, and very inspiring presentation by your own leadership, which you provided to Georgia. And I think I'm sure I'm not the only one who was thinking similar situation in Pakistan. I think what you were saying, problems and solutions, perhaps we could relate each and every slide to Pakistan. And I'm sure we'll have many questions and comments from the audience. We have 2 standing mics here, and I will request to please queue up so that we know that who is going to answer, who is going to make a contribution. We have, let's say, about 20 to 25 minutes for this session, and I'm sure people would like to pose questions. So Moin Bartley would like to start first. Please. Make an introduction, and then.
From Think Build Scale Private Limited. Yes, a great similarity, definitely. And then I was, of course, the next thought is, how can this happen in Pakistan? How can something similar happen in Pakistan? And I think. So the obstacle perhaps, or not, I shouldn't say the obstacle, but I was thinking about the political sort of backing of change. So my question is that how does one strengthen that? How does one increase that? I mean, you had a lot of turmoil. And then out of turmoil came change. But I mean, we haven't had that level of turmoil here. But how can we get that push? Because there's inertia. Things are still similar in terms of the bureaucracy, tax administration. How can one create that momentum if things haven't gotten to that much of a chaos to produce real change? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'm Mahmood, and I'm from Pakistan Institute of Economics. My quick question to you, since you have mentioned that you were the minister at that time, and I'm basically going to second the question which was just asked related to the political affiliations. What was the kind of the process which was used? Was it a kind of a bipartisan process to achieve these goals? Or was it purely based on some kind of a professional approach in which politics was basically the driving force, but some kind of an institution which led all these reforms? This is my first. Second quick question, I just browsed in terms of your country's relationship with the IMF. And you have also mentioned some kind of external challenges which was put in terms of your reforms as well. So was there kind of an external push towards the demand for these reforms, or was it totally based on your own domestic agendas? Thank you.
Thank you. Both these questions are absolutely relevant and right to target. So let me start by political environment, what we had at that time. So in 2003, there was an election in Georgia, and then then that time the political leadership had some kind of serious problems to deal with the elections on a proper way. That was kind of, rigged quite heavily. And that caused a huge manifestation outside. People came out saying that, protesting this one. And then the government, at that time, the president was forced to appoint new elections. And then that allowed some kind of coalition of new political forces came into power. That was a kind of coalition of three political forces. They came into power, dealing with, and of course, that was a huge room of opportunity for these political forces to pursue reforms, because, fortunately or unfortunately, democracy itself is quite not efficient environment for pursuing hard reforms. Those reforms that are a little bit difficult, usually they are playing of course, that's normal. The politicians are trying to playing their populistic role, saying that, to get to win in next elections, etc. So therefore, there is always some kind of room of dealing with some reforms, some period of time. That's why this particular period of time, from 2004 to 2008, was the excellent window of opportunity to deal with these reforms. Transferring that to Pakistan, it's also difficult for me to just, to assess or judge. I'm not an expert at this particular moment, so it's very difficult. But what I can definitely say is that some kind of consensus with political players, that's really very important. Consensus with political players. It doesn't mean that consensus with political parties, but political players. And players might not be in political parties. That might be in Georgia, for example, influence of Georgia Orthodox Church was very high. And because of that, when we were tackling corruption, for example, we were also communicating with them, saying that, can you support us, politically, also saying at least that, corruption is bad. Right? And that would be a very important element for us to pursue this. And if you have this kind of, support from different political players, that's of course really very important to pursue this reform. Regarding IMF, before these reforms, all the time, there was some kind of temptation from the government to blame someone. Saying that, that's coming, they were that's coming from IMF, that's coming from the World Bank, that's coming from different kind of international players, and they were just, saying that, we are forced to do this, we don't want it, but, the IMF is saying this, that's why we have to do this. And that's some kind of, I don't think this is good game in general, because I think that government has to take the responsibility. We cannot blame anyone outside. This is just our job. We should do our job. Some of you are engaged in businesses. Can you blame bank right away? No, I mean, this is your business. If you go to one bank and they get the credit, this is your business. You have another choice as well, but this is your choice. So, and that from that particular perspective, we thought that, okay, IMF is IMF. We cannot change that. This is just an institution which was created specifically for stability, macro stability. They care about macro stability. They don't care about, whether you are collecting more, less, growing more, fast. It's not their job. Their job is that it should be macro stability has to be achieved. And therefore, they are just, focusing from that perspective. If they see that there are some risks, I mean, and we had a lot of risks, as you see, reducing taxes, abolishing many taxes, etc. They were saying that, okay, this is a risk. We cannot just, support this. Then we said, okay, can we find a way that we just do this, and then if we show that we are committing to this particular reform, we are collecting more than you are supporting? Then they said, okay, well, let's try. Okay, but, that was not easy, but, that is a process of, catching or finding the trust or or keeping the trust within each other. And that's, of course, like, again, like, I'm not a fan or opponent of IMF, because from my point of view, they have absolutely different objective than the government may have. So that's why, okay, we can blame, but we can blame, but there is no benefit out of this at the end, right? We should do our job. That's the point. That's about IMF.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Mr. Alex. This is Muhammad Anas Khan, and I'm head of ACCI department at MIUC, which is a project of Roots International for Higher Education. So my question is regarding government spending. You talked about a lot of good strategies and reform strategies, incentives and all that. So what was the Georgia strategy for governmental spending? If I compare Pakistan, so a lot of, cost that is bear in terms of, which is debt payment, and, inefficient governmental spending policies, like less than 2% GDP is allocated to education and health. So if you could give an example of that as well. And another question that I would like to ask is, if I give you an example of Pakistan economic landscape, currently we have more than $450 billion informal economy. So moving from informal economy to formal economy, if you can give some examples from your experience at that time, how did you move from, informal economy to the formal economy? Because, and globally, more than 2 billion people, they are working in the informal economy. So ultimately, they are not registered, the employees, they are not registered with the tax authorities, definitely affect the GDP. So these are my two questions, if you would like to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Hassan Gilani. I'm working with PTV World as a reporter. Now, Alex, I totally understand you're not an expert on Pakistani economy, but still I would like to understand from you that based on your rich experience of financial management, if you were to recapitulate a couple of, or more than that, best practices or those time-tested methods that you believed could have been or would have been applied internationally and could be applied in Pakistan too, in terms of stopping or arresting Pakistan's economic morass and putting Pakistan on the path towards economic development. Thank you.
First, let me start by strategy for spending. So, first of all, I think actually what we did, the first step was that introduced some new instruments. I'm not sure how, whether that already exists in Pakistan or not, but the first element that we just decided to introduce is basic data and direction instrument. That was like the document that was describing what are the next 5-year plan in the economy. Oh, that's like, this is not a plan, this is not like a huge commitment, this is more like a vision. What are the trends in the economy, what we can achieve towards that, and then how we can just look at that from spending perspective as well. The next one was this medium-term expenditure framework. And medium-term expenditure framework, that's also another instrument that was introduced by us, but also showed how we can see this, each of these spending area, like, whether this is agriculture, whether it's healthcare, education, or infrastructure, how we can just, look at that in a medium-term perspective, like next 5 years, let's see, 3 to 5, and how much we can spend for this. And those particular documents were like talking or discussing document, debating documents in the parliament, because Ministry of Finance was initially was responsible for everything. People were coming to me and asking, why do you spend for this sport? For example, this type of the sport and not spending for this type of the sport. Let's say, why you are spending for cricket and not spending for another sport. And then I said, how I cannot, I mean, I'm a Minister of Finance. I'm not a sports expert or Minister of Sports, right? So, and there is a Minister of Culture in which the sport is included, and that's why they can just answer this question. But Minister of Culture didn't want to enter into these debates all the time. They were saying, no, I don't have money. You go and approach Minister of Finance, they will tell you why they are not having money. So, and this is not a proper, this is not also proper solution for this, right? So that's why we decided, okay, each of this spending area, this is more or less clearly determined like prior to next 3 to 5 years, and each of these ministry, they have to decide their own policies under these particular allocations, right? And that was really very important element for coordination within the government itself. Because otherwise you have all the time like blaming each other, saying that, I don't have money, otherwise I would just, build great things in agriculture, right? So Minister of Agriculture would say that I don't have money because of Minister of Finance, otherwise I'm just genius. And that's not a proper approach at the end, right? So, and this is very important element. And next is that as we go through these particular strategic decisions, of course we know that for example, spending for social benefits, like, whether this is pension or unemployment benefit or whatever, this is just, the current spending. And if we not invest in capital expenditures, like, infrastructure or education, etc., then of course, like, we are standing on the same side, so same place. And we need to understand how we should just, keep this proper proportion so that, that our objectives are achieved. And the rest, and the last one, which I also wanted to mention, is so-called like program budgeting elements. Like, program budgeting is that we just impose this one for particular ministries, saying that, we will not give you money for current expenditures, just paying salaries. But we want to know exactly what you will achieve with your activities after 1 year. For example, like Minister of Agriculture or Minister of whatever, like trade, what they are achieving, what they want, why they need this salary. What is the point? If they are not doing anything at the end of the year, I mean, we don't have any particular result, we do not need this bureaucracy at all, right? And bureaucracy is another issue also, like, when we abolish these licenses, after some period of time, we realized that some new licenses, but by different names, were just emerged. Like, we call that license and the abolished license, and then some bureaucratic unit created some kind of barrier or whatever called administrative paper or something like that, or accreditation, or something like that. And this is the nature of bureaucracy. If you still not just, then we said, okay, if these guys do not have any job, but, imposing this kind of stuff, then we do not need this. Let's abolish this unit or department or ministry. Who cares? Because our main objective is to pursue, like, to create an environment for businesses, and businesses have to create proper employment, and then employment is what people need, right? So this is exactly what is needed, and that's how growth comes. Otherwise, there is no growth. So about spending strategies, this approach. Regarding informal economy. Informal economy is a very important part, of course, because informal economy was really very high. Since this is obvious, like when you are not, you cannot collect taxes, of course, that shows that the informal economy is very high. So what our main point again was to make everything as possible, as simple, as easy. That helps this informal economy to be formal. Because I don't think that, I don't think that the human being is a criminal. Philosophically, I don't believe that human being, whoever he is, he's a criminal. That doesn't want to obey the rules or not paying taxes. The problem is that this is so difficult, this is so burdensome, this is so tough that they are enforced to be on the other way. And therefore, our main job in the government is to create an environment where these people are the part of proper society, and that's why we said that, starting, the next question is, how do you think how Pakistan should start? I think that the first point is that abolish all the barriers which is related to entering the business. Make it as easy as possible to start the business, make it as easy as possible to open an account in the bank. It is also like, weird how it should be difficult, because that is like the main source for the banks and the main source for everyone. So why it should be difficult to open a banking account, right? So, and make it as easy as possible, also paying taxes, licenses, and permits, etc., etc., etc. So, and if we do this process, then we see support from the society, and this support will drive us towards more reforms. That's how I think about this. Like, I believe in this. Maybe I'm still, again, not an expert. Maybe there are some other problems which I don't see, but that's how I see this legalization of the economy. Okay.
Hello, Mr. Alexi. As you mentioned that Georgian state were, some sort of major corruption practices, and now you are on the track to eliminate the corrupt practices. I would like to mention, to ask that what basic steps have been taken by the Georgian government to eliminate the corrupt practices, corruption. Especially, I would like to mention here in Pakistan, as we have multiple departments to counter the corruption: Anti-Corruption Department, National Accountability Bureau, some sort of there, and Federal Investigative Agency, FIA. But we cannot tackle or mitigate the corrupt practices. Specifically, I would like to say, what steps have been taken by the government to eliminate the corrupt in Georgia? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Pakistan. I'm Mohammed Ahmed Zubair. I have three interrelated questions. You mentioned in the beginning that Georgia was facing huge amount of areas. So my question is that, what strategy was adopted to clear the areas? My second one is that at the time of the start of the reform process, did you have debt sustainability issues? And if yes, how that was addressed? And my third point related to is, how did you tackle, if at all there was an issue, the defense and state security budget to bring in line with the economic, the tax envelope of the country? Thank you.
Maybe the last set of questions, and then we close.
Engineer Islam, Vice President, Vice Chairman, Constructor Association of Pakistan. Thank you very much, Mr. Alexi, for your detailed presentation. And the figures are very interesting. And I have two questions, just very short questions. One is that, how you overcome the resistance from the bureaucracy for the implementation of reforms? Which was the main step? Second, my question is this, that these reforms were implemented by the young leadership or the senior leadership of your country?
Thank you. Nadia Tahir, economist. Alexei, thank you for wonderful presentation. I have two quick questions. One is high growth, low inflation, and high unemployment in Georgia. What type of growth is this? Second, how you made people to pay taxes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, first of all, corruption practices, how we tackle that. I just, mentioned several, fundamental approaches, saying that, there are some general stuff. General stuff is that if you want the corruption to disappear, you should care about cause of corruption itself. Why this corruption happens? Why they are dealing with each other, the citizen and the public servants? Why they are dealing with these operations by paying bribes and not otherwise? What is the cause for that? Because in many cases we see that the cause is this particular element, like requirement for the paper, requirement for the heavy, bureaucratic hurdles or elements. That's why better to just, get rid of those ones, first of all. This is the one. The second is that, I also mentioned that there is an intolerance with corruption, saying that, when we came into power and then took the position, our main message was that, to the Ministry of Finance, including Ministry of the Tax Department and Customs, which was heavily corrupted, saying that, we don't take bribes anymore. Just forget about this. What was the reaction from your point of view? Reaction was that everyone were silent, saying that, okay, come on. We know this is just, another, the game. You are just talking about that, but, you will do this yourself. But the most important one is that, we should show that, this is not tolerated. And even if we see something like there, we have to react on that. Whatever is there, it doesn't matter. And that was very important one. Many tax officers and customs officers were arrested because of this particular one, getting bribes or being, accused in bribery. So intolerance is very important, and support from law enforcement in this particular case is really very important at the same time. Because what is happening, if the corruption is everywhere, this is common, the most corrupted one is law enforcement institution itself. Right? So that's really very important. If we have this approach, that has to be very important political consensus within the leadership of the country, saying that, okay, if we do this, that's not only the Ministry of Finance should do this, but the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Security, Ministry of, all these ministries should have this common approach, saying that, okay, we are not tolerating corruption anymore. Which is really very difficult, but that's the very important element towards it, because this is like some kind of political consensus. The next point also is that now working in other countries, that's also, we realize that in different environments that might be different approach. It's not like, one particular prescription or formula, you could just, go and do it with the same manner. In Georgia, for example, customs, as I mentioned to you, is that was the most corrupted institution. And then how you can change it? And, we tried a lot, I decided that maybe we can bring new generation, youngsters, with enthusiasm. We put there at the customs checkpoint and they will be less corrupted. After 2 weeks, they became exactly the same what was before. Why? Because, who met there before, working before, they had some practices, they just, introduced these practices to them, that they became exactly the same. So that was not, then we decided maybe we can increase salary. Come on, who cares about salary? They are just, benefiting much more than salary, right? So there is no need for it. So then we decided, okay, maybe we just, do another point. We trained some part of people, absolutely new guys. They never had any connection with customs. We trained them isolated to customs. And in one particular day, we changed on one particular checkpoint 100% of officers. just write 100%. Like in the morning, there was totally new people with newly trained instructions and completely new guys. And they didn't know how to get into this bribery, right? So they're just, following the instructions that they never had in mind, like, how to deal with that. And that was very helpful because we realized that these practices are important to do. And then, of course, businesses started doing absolutely different. The businesses were just, applying for bribery, right? So, and then we tried to punish both sides until that has also helped. And then what we called that was like an approach of oasis, when we created one particular oasis without corruption, and then we just, spilled over to other checkpoints and clearance offices, etc. So that took around 2 years. But this is one particular example that I can share. That doesn't mean that, that can be done somewhere, but that's how this, innovative approaches might be helpful in this regard. Clear areas, that was also we had huge areas, and we had we created a plan that was around a year and a half, 18 months plan to pay for these areas, and that was one of the main priority. We did not increase the spending for other items until we just spent those areas, and that was very important. And we did not increase the salary, didn't increase anything unless we paid all these areas, because that is also a matter of trust. People should trust that you are doing really very tangible stuff. That sustainability is also an issue. That sustainability was, we also tried using those elements, BDD and MTF, medium-term expenditure framework, for debt management and debt sustainability. But initially I told you that, we were almost defaulted, bankrupted, and that's why we entered to Paris Club for restructurization of debts, and that went very well. We had some kind of challenges with Turkmenistan. They just, they didn't know what the Paris Club is. They wanted to just pay this debt right away, and etc. I will not go deeper into this, but then we managed to deal with this restructurization and sustainability. Defense and security, this is very important part. As I mentioned, that approach of these reforms is very complex. Initially, in 2000 until 2002, three Ministry of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Security in Georgia had a separate line. They never actually had kind of their own revenues in the budget. So state budget was the state budget, and they also had their own some kind of documents. And then that was also kind of, consensus, saying that, okay, if we really want to achieve proper public finance management system, we need to keep all the financials, public finances, in one particular document. That should be the budget of the country. And then, we got absolutely positive signal, because they also saw that, this is very important for the further development of the country. Although, there was again, consensus. We thought that, we will not reduce your spending. I mean, whatever you are doing, we understand that's really very important for the country, but let us just make it, put it in the budget. Of course, at the same time, we all understand that there are some items which are secret items, and then there is the need for them to make it, just, make sure that, they do their own procurements or whatever they do, on a proper way, so that, this is... And that was some kind of agreement, and this agreement helped us and worked quite well. Bureaucracy resistance, as I mentioned, is one of the biggest challenges. So, in many cases, and I will go right away on the second question, is about leadership. Because leadership is, in that particular case, comes from the top to down. For reforms, specifically on this particular manner, or this particular area, when we are talking about public finances, etc., I don't believe that, someone from the ground will start something and then achieve something in the top. That's not, I've never seen it. Maybe there is any case, but I've never seen it. Therefore, I think that has to be from the top down, and if there is the resistance, we have to overcome. Might be either this bureaucrat does whatever you say, or he leaves the job. Otherwise, it's not doable otherwise, because it's we can be in permanent discussions. Also another issue, very interesting point was that before these reforms and during the reforms also we realized that there is always some kind of temptation for this strategy elaboration all the time. Like, you know, we are elaborating one strategy, and while we starting implementing this strategy, already this is outdated, we are elaborating new strategy, this strategy, all the time, strategy papers, and that's not like never-ending game. And therefore, like, I think that we need to have like a general vision with clear understanding what we really want to do, and then push towards the implementation, rather than just all the time, because that's also one of the trap for bureaucracy. Like, you know, they will say, no, now we will prepare the strategy, and afterwards we will start the reform. And then they will start working on strategy maybe for next 2 years, and when they finish the strategy, this is already outdated, and then they will start the new strategy. And so that's exactly the instruments that they are using all the time, based on my experience. And very interesting question about high growth, inflation, and unemployment. So that's definitely true. So for Georgia, I mentioned about that. This is structural unemployment, which is really very important element. So we inherited some industries that are not efficient. At the same time, we inherited educational system which are supplying those professions which are related to those industries that are not efficient. So therefore, this is some kind of vicious circle at the end. And you are absolutely right. So how that comes, like where this growth comes from. And this growth comes from the new areas or sectors that emerged from after these reforms especially. And, you know, for example, previously we were subsidizing some areas because some sectors. For example, wine sector is one of them. We thought that, you know, wine sector, this is tradition, you know, Georgia, like, you know, wine comes from Georgia, and, you know, do we need to keep this, etc., etc. And then what happened is that when we stopped subsidizing, this is not stopped completely, but still, when we stopped subsidizing this, they developed much better because then they became more competitive, you know, in the world market. And that was one of the signals for us, saying that, okay, maybe we should not intervene into economy further. Like, you know, better to just, you know, backdoor, and saying that, okay, let us create some kind of good rules for the game, and let them just, you know, play this game, right? So that's and the main source for growth is investments. The main source is investment, for sure, at this particular moment. Little bit of productivity, because that's there are some areas that increases productivity. In this area of sectors, we see high growth rate in construction, and that is like, you know, almost permanent, like starting from 2004 till now. And we see that